everyone. Let us come to the first panel session for today on social media monitoring and reporting. This panels talk about big data analytics. What are social media monitoring reports and how do you use it to get the maximum results? What are the best tools to use and what metrics should I be measuring? Let us welcome our moderator for this panel, Accounts Director at CrowdTangle, a leader in digital journalism and authority in handling social media content, Asha Phillips.
So I'm Asha. I work for CrowdTangle, which is a social media monitoring and analytics tool. I'll just give you a brief background about myself, then I'll introduce the panelists to the stage as well. So I started my career in journalism. I spent a decade as a journalist, a producer and a reporter working in broadcast media mostly. And I've focused a lot in the last 5 years on social media in the broadcast news industry. And a couple of years back, I switched into focusing on social media to find news content. And more recently, with CrowdTangle, I'm working with newsrooms and brands and agencies around the world, helping them understand how to track their own content on social media, how to track their brand's performance, and how to benchmark against competitors as well, using CrowdTangle and other tools. So I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to the panel, the topics of today. So we're going to be looking at how to measure your content performance on social media. We're going to look at different tools that you can use to do that, whether that be the tools, the social platforms themselves like Facebook and Twitter, or third-party tools. We're going to ask and hopefully answer the question that many people have, what is it that I should be measuring on social media? And what do these metrics actually mean? When I'm looking at engagement, what does engagement really mean? And what does it mean to me and to my brand? How do I benchmark against competitors? So what is it that I should be looking at to compare my brand with some of the competitors in the market? And then lastly, the most importantly, what do I actually do with this data? So these are all very important questions that you need to be asking constantly as social media evolves and changes, and it does very quickly. So the few things I want to highlight here are there are different types of metrics that we can look at with social media or with even just an online presence. There's consumption metrics, which basically means how are people consuming your content online or on social media? Are they reading your news articles? Are they liking or commenting on your post on Facebook? Are they sharing your tweet? Are they commenting on Instagram, etc.? Sort of following on from that is the sharing metrics. So are people actually then sharing your content, sharing information about your brand, or helping even share a message that you're trying to send? Lead generation metrics, and this is quite simply, in the business side of things. So what is it that my social media presence is actually doing for my business? Is it helping me grow my business? Now that could be many different things. If you're in the news industry, that might be just bringing people to the website to read your news articles. That might be paying for a subscription to something. It might be buying a product or a service, etc. And then finally, obviously, sales metrics. So what I mean by sales metrics here is being able to actually measure a direct connection between your social media and your online presence to a sales metric in some way. It doesn't necessarily need to be an exact kind of number figure, and oftentimes it's impossible to do that. But it's more about you internally realizing what it is you're trying to achieve, what is the end goal, and how do we sort of link that with social media and our brand online. So here I'd like to point out that the end goal is action, not just eyeballs. So we don't just want people looking at our content on social media or even just liking, retweeting, etc. We want to see further action from that. So again, that comes back to the metrics of sort of sales metrics, or lead generation. So if I'm a news publisher, I want people to come to my news site. I want people to buy a subscription to the New York Times if that's where I'm working, or I want people to buy my product. So you need to really be thinking about what you're doing on social media and how that will give you kind of the end goal, whatever that is for your business. Just finally, there are a couple of social media trends emerging this year, and I've broken them out into 3 sections here. So if we're looking at video, a video we've been talking about for a long, long time, and it's always a very, very important thing in the online and social media world. And the reason is, as Shane mentioned in his keynote, is that content, good content, imagery, video, is extremely engaging. Now, video I'm pointing out here because Facebook has a huge focus on video this year and beyond. They've released 360 video, Facebook Live as well, and this is increasingly becoming a big push for them, and also with Instagram now that they're owning that. So we're seeing, just as an example, BuzzFeed getting 2.5 billion content views on their videos online, on social as well, and 35% of their ad revenue is coming from video, not only this year, but last year and the year before. So we're seeing a huge increase in sales metrics coming from social media through video. Distribution. Now we're looking at things like Snapchat here, Facebook Live video, instant articles as well on Facebook for some of the news publishers. So there's a lot you can do here as a brand on these social platforms, and not just in the simple way of posting content like an image or even just a video, but actually using these platforms to do things live, like live tweeting from an event, taking live video from an event that you're sponsoring, for example. And then finally, messaging and chat apps. And again, this has been talked about for at least a year now. The likes of WeChat, WhatsApp, Line, etc., increasingly becoming important in the brand space. So you need to think about some strategies around that as well. Okay, I'd like to introduce my panelists to come up on the stage. Okay, so first up we have Zoe Cairns. Zoe is an expert in social media and online marketing in the UK. Welcome. Zoe has worked with top brands and Fortune 500 companies to ensure that their online strategies are in line with business goals. Welcome, Zoe. Crystal Queck is the VP of APAC at Brandwatch, an exciting and fast-growing social media company, intelligence agency. She was previously lead content for Twitter across APAC, Middle East, North Africa, Russia, and Greater China. Hello. Last but not least, we have Christopher Tock, who's the founder and CEO of socialgrooves.com, which is a boutique digital agency specialising in digital branding, trend-setting campaigns, influencer marketing, and crisis management. He's worked with a lot of multinationals, including AirAsia, Burger King, and Domino's. So welcome to all the panellists.
I don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem. So I'll pass over to the panellists they're going to give quick presentations, and then we'll do a couple of Q&A sessions. I've got some questions, but you guys have a think about what you'd like to ask the panellists as well. So I'll hand over to Zoe first.
Okay, good morning everyone. Just while my slides are up on the screen. Everyone enjoying it so far? Yeah? What's been your favourite part? Yesterday, today, learning more? Okay, just one. How many of you are currently measuring your social media? Let's keep cutting out. Testing? Yep, hear me? Let's see a show of hands of how many of you are measuring your social media activities at the moment. Let's see a show of hands. Okay. How many challenges with that? Show of hands? Okay, let's hope we can cover some areas your challenges. This keeps cutting out. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to get on okay with it. Can you hear me okay now? Yeah? Cool. Sorry about that. Let's get started. So I'm going to talk to you about what is important to measure and the best low-cost tools that you can start using to start measuring your social media activities. So I'm going to keep it quite an overview because I'd love to go into more detail. And if you want to know more detail from me, I'm around at lunch, so just grab me if you want to, and I can go into more detail. However, I feel I'm going to share with you what is important to measure in the first 3 to 6 months when you really start your social media strategy. Okay, so when you first start out, or if you haven't started measuring your results and you want to start somewhere, I feel this is the best place to start. Okay, so first of all, I feel that it's really important when you start is that you start monitoring your influence. You start to measure how influential you're becoming online. Okay, so influence means, are people starting to listen to you and are they enjoying what you're posting out there? Okay, I feel that's really important for you to start to build an awareness and a presence with people online. Because if you're not doing that, then they're not going to take the next action of them buying or following through to your call to action. So it's really important they get to know who you are, what you do, and to build that know, like, and trust factor. Okay, so building an influence is where you're going to get more known online and people are going to get to know you. Okay, so influence is a really important measurement in your first 3 to 6 months and continually on your journey as well. But it's important that you measure influence. And the way that we measure it with big clients that we work with and also smaller companies as well is through a tool called Clout. Has anyone heard of Clout? Show of hands. Yeah, Clout is a great tool. Some people use it for a vanity reason. I've got a higher Clout score than you. Back in the UK, lots of people use it. They say that they're in the top 70 Clout club. It's not something to be used for vanity reasons. It's something for you to use as a business or an individual, as a blogger, to see how people are actually engaging with you. Are people actually listening to you? Are you becoming an influencer within your field? Okay, so Clout's a great tool to use. It gives you a score out of 100. It looks at your social media profiles as to how people are listening to you. Are they sharing your content? Are they clicking on your links? Are they actually listening and finding you influential? It's a really great measurement tool to use, and I recommend using Clout in the first 3 to 6 months to make sure that your score is increasing, because the more your score increases, the more you know more people are starting to listen to you and to engage. Okay, so it's a great tool to start using. Community engagement is another one that I feel is really important to measure in the first 3 to 6 months as well. Without a community, you're not going to get the engagement and the people to take that call to action. Building your community is important. However, it's not all about the numbers. It's about the quality of those people. So quantity v quality. I believe in quality. I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started out, I thought it was all about getting lots and lots of followers on Twitter. So I started to follow everyone, and it wasn't about that. It was about the quality of the people. I would rather 5 followers that had a big community of people that when they shared my content, it went out and it was more credible coming from them than it was coming from me, because they were known within that community. So then they would then be very influential within that audience. So I'd rather them share my content to their audience than me trying to build up relationships with, thousands and thousands of people. So quality is more important than quantity. And I believe that when you first start out on social media, it's about finding those influencers. And that's something we're going to be talking about later as well. So community engagement is really key. The engagement with your community is so important because social media is about engagement. It's not just about broadcasting. Social media is a communication tool for us to communicate and build a know, like, and trust. It's about us really connecting and building long-term business relationships. It's not about a short-term transaction. It's about really building relationships. And I feel that when you start to engage, that's when you start to get your return on influence. I call it that first, within the first 3 to 6 months. The influence is where you need to be at. You need to be at the stage of return on influence within that first 3 to 6 months. And then when you build the influence, it's then that you start to get that return on investment. People start to build that know, like and trust with you, that they then want to buy your products and your services, or they want to work with you, or they want to refer people to you or build your network more. Okay? So some of the tools that I use to engage with my community, to create great content that my community engages with me, and to measure my community engagement are some of these up on the screen. So back in the UK, we use a tool called Sendable. Sendable is a great tool where we monitor the engagement. We do a lot of conversations through Sendable. It measures our clout score. It tells us which people are engaging with what posts, what was the most influential posts that we put out there. So it's a great tool to manage your social media profiles. BuzzSumo we use to gather great content that we know is already getting a lot of community engagement out there on the internet. Has anyone heard of BuzzSumo before? Raise hands. Yeah, BuzzSumo is a great tool. If you're not sure on what content is really trending right now within your industry, go on to BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo, you type in your industry keyword and you get all the trending articles, infographics, pictures that are trending within your industry. And you know that they're getting that engagement because it tells you how many shares they've had on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So it's a great tool to use. TweetReach, how many of you use TweetReach? Yeah, TweetReach is a free tool. So most of these are free. And there's a free version of Sendable, which is a low standard package. BuzzSumo's free, up to so many searches a day. TweetReach is free, where you can go on and see how far a hashtag has, and how far your tweets have travelled. That's a great way to find impressions, your top contributors, to when people that may have retweeted you. So that's another way to find your influencers, people that are engaging with your content. Follow-a-Wonk, have you heard of Follow-a-Wonk before? Again, another free tool. There's a free version where you can compare your competitors with your activity. And I love this when, if you're working in a big company and you need to persuade higher level directors or board directors, it's great to compare your competitors' counts with yours to show them the activity and how your measurements are going with your company. It's great. It looks really great on a graph. I should have actually put a graph up on the screen, but it's a great way to really showcase your activities and how well you're doing. Social Mention, another measurement tool that I use for reputation management. There's a free version of that as well. Tells you what people are saying about you online. Twubs is the hashtag directory, a free tool. How about Tweeted? How many of you have heard about Tweeted? Okay, Tweeted tells you the best time to tweet. So if you want to get the most from your tweets that you put out, Tweeted does give you a timetable of when the best time to tweet is. It looks at when your followers are most active online. I use this. I got more from my tweets of when I used the timetable. My measurements were more accurate in terms of that when I tweeted out, my tweets got more reactions, they got more shares. I got more people engaging with that as well. So that's a really good tool. And how about Icon Square? Icon No Square. I call it Icon No Square. Anyone heard of Icon No Square? This is a great tool. How many of you use Instagram in the room? Okay, this is a fab tool for Instagram. It gives you the best time to post on Instagram. It gives you which people have been engaging with you the most. It tells you the influencers within your industry as well. It's a great tool to use, and it gives you great measurement reports. So it tells you how well you did this month to last month, what you could actually tweak, what was your top post. So it's a great measurement tool that you can be using, and great for that community engagement. So we was just there talking about the tools for community engagement, how you can start measuring that and why it's important. It's important to engage with your audience, not just broadcast to them. Okay, engagement is a big thing in social media right now. It's important that you engage. It's important that you communicate with your audience. That's what's going to take your social media to the next level when you start to engage. And then the other tools that are completely free that I still find really powerful and valuable as well for free that we can use these are Facebook Insights and Twitter Analytics. Twitter Analytics is constantly changing. It's a great platform for us to analyse our results. It's great for us to look at the top posts, top media tweets that we've done, how many impressions that we've got. Although I don't like measuring impressions, I feel that's just a number out there. I look at how many people have actually mentioned me, how many people have engaged with me, how many people have actually I've actually connected with, and who visited my profile is another one I look at as well. Those people that have viewed my profile, I find that they're looking to find out more information about me. There's lots of different metrics in there that I'd love to go into more detail about, but these are just the main ones that I'm highlighting to you. And then the last one, the third thing, is traffic and your return on investment, or initially your return on influence. Important that you think about what is your call to action. How many of you in the room have got a call to action from your social media activities? How many of you have got a sales funnel? Raise of hands. Okay, so when you first start out on social media, you remember we just saw that lovely quote from Asha. She said it's not all it's about action, not all about the eyeballs. Yeah? It's really important that we think about what is it that you want your user to do when they've engaged with you. I know it's not all about transaction, but it could be that you give them away a free ebook or a free gift, or you get them into your sales funnel and then you nurture them to take them on to the next level of working with you. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, so it's important that you think about, before you even start out on social media, is your social media strategy. Your social media strategy is so key. When you put together your social media strategy, it's then that you think about what is going to be the call to action and how does my sales funnel look. Okay, this is then going to measure the traffic and your return on influence and the investment. So once you think about the sales funnel, people go in, and that's when you can start to really measure as well. But here's some other tools that can measure your traffic and your return on influence or your return on investment. We use with clients Google Analytics. Okay, Google Analytics is a really important one. It helps analyse what traffic's come from your social media profiles and how many people from conversion tracking. So it's sometimes people shy away from conversion tracking, but it's great to set up goals to actually analyse. For example, I can say how many people come from my Facebook page or my Facebook ad, went to my website, signed up for my free ebook, and then went into my funnel. I can actually analyse that percentage each month by looking at my conversion tracking on my Google Analytics, and that's something you should really consider when measuring traffic. And then there's also it's not all about transaction. I talk a lot about building relationships. I'm very much about building connections, building networks, and I think that that's also a powerful thing about social media. Reason why I'm here today is because I done some work in Dubai. I met a guy there called Addy who is part of my event, and we connected online. I established a business relationship, and then that's why I've ended up here today. It's amazing how you can build relationships online, and I feel what's more important in the first outset of your social media is about building business relationships. You know, when you build business relationships, you build a know, like, and trust, and it's then that the transaction will then follow. It's not all about money. Transaction is a short-term relationship. If you go out and just try and get transaction, it's going to end very soon, whereas if you go out and build relationships, that's what follows through. Okay? So, 3 things, just to recap, was influence. Measure your influence. Measure your community engagement, and also measure your traffic or your return on investment, or what I like is the return on influence. Okay? Thank you.
Right, just take a load up the slides. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Christopher Talk. I'm the founder of Social Grooves, a boutique agency focusing on trend-setting campaigns, influencer marketing, and digital campaigns. And I'm here today as not only as a social media chamber member, part organizer, but also the person who is in charge of running the social media presence, measuring the data that we're producing even now as we do live tweets, and I think many more things that we're actually doing underneath the whole event. After this, you'll be able to find out how we can get trending, what our data means to both our clients and so partners and sponsors, and how this can actually affect help your brand. So without further ado, let me just go through my slides, and then we can go for a discussion. Okay, we'll just skip all this. So this is what we do. So evolution of KPIs. Now we've just heard from Zoe on some of the tools that we've mentioned, and something that's in common with what we've been talking so far is the fact that things like impression, and these are numbers that are probably from the traditional KPIs, and it's something that most companies and brands and even the top management, your board of trustees, this is what they see, and they're not able to understand the new media KPIs. So this is where I attempt to educate and try and help you to explain to the top management why we should be looking at different sets of KPIs instead of what we are used to. So what are some of the family metrics that you've been accustomed to? Basically, just some of those things we mentioned. Number of mentions. So sorry, I think it's affecting the mic. Okay. Some of the mentions, audience, impressions, PR value, and these are all KPIs that have been introduced since ages of times, before digital was ever came up, and then the next thing you know, you could actually see engagement. You could actually look at the virality of a campaign, or how many mentions as a campaign is brought on digital, and also as word of mouth. So the question is whether is it still relevant, or has it become irrelevant? The point that I'm trying to make is that whether we like it or not, impressions and metrics that we've been using for so long will still be used as some sort of KPI, because metrics that we bring up the boardroom end up pleasing the board instead of pleasing the business. I think a lot of you will understand this. Hands up if you understand what I'm talking about. Yeah? So you know very well that some of the campaigns you do end up giving more numbers instead of business goals that help the company. Unfortunately, that's something that we have to accept, and we have to then work on how to then convince these top management, investors, etc., etc. So first of all, you have to separate what we see as the previous KPIs and what we see as the current KPIs. Matrix that we use from the past is what we call as potential matrix, metrics. What does it mean? It means things like impressions, eyeballs. 20,000 people have seen this. 1 million people have seen this. The star subscriber is about 1 million strong. These are all potential metrics. Yeah, they are not an indicator of success. This means that 1 million people might have seen this, but it doesn't show us that there's actually a number to encapsulate the actual number of people seeing this. Whereas in Facebook, you can easily see the reach. When you see the reach of a post, that is the exact numbers of people actually viewing that content, as opposed to the number of fans that you have. So what a lot of the KPIs of the past is what we call as potential matrices. But what about measuring achievements? So achievement is what we can see right now with these digital KPIs coming to point, click-throughs, reach, engagements, and now even more complex sort of engagements. As you know, Facebook has introduced smileys, sad, angry, and so on and so forth. So as we move on, this evolution is bound to happen, and thankfully, I guess this is where we can sort of single out things like impression and all, as a thing of the past, and look towards the future. Furthermore, comparison has never been easier with this sort of KPIs. As you know, PR value it's a little bit iffy. I worked with some PR companies before, and they told me that one blog post on the net is worth, say, 5,000 ringgit. And I have no idea how this is brought up. Sure, maybe some sites sell their banners at this much. So, if you calculate the number of pixels and you say, 3,000 ringgit per banner per week, and now that's why when you have an article in this blog, it costs that much. And I will tell them back, are you sure this is how you measure? That site had about, say, 600,000 views a day, and this blogger only has 5,000 views a day. So how can you put the same value for one blog post to that one banner ad? So, these are things that they cannot explain back, and but it is what it is. PR companies have no choice but to measure it that way, because clients cannot understand any other measurement apart from what they're used to. So an achievement is the conversion of a potential. If all we can do is calculate the potential, so how do you know if we succeed or not? So that's where we have to shift towards a new sort of KPI. So we tie back to a KPI that, so what we can do is to tie back the KPI to what the board of directors is familiar with, except we replace one which is more accurate, traceable, and more importantly, financially feasible, and use terms such as engagements, brand mentions, hot, cold leads, that cannot be done using the traditional advertising, with hope that one day they will allow you the budget to increase on the digital advertising as opposed to traditional. Because to us, to the new age, to new media, ROI is about asking if we have changed the behavior of our customer and not the other way around. Again, I'm repeating like an old record, but a marketer is it is not a transactional relationship, but rather an emotional relationship. So that is the thing that we are going to talk about in the next few slides. So enter the new media. What is a KPI? Setting a KPI is really important, and it is the reference from every other campaign that you're going to build on. Forget what matters. Last time you would ask your digital agency, I want to increase my likes by 10,000. Yeah, I want to increase my impressions by 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. Those are not, not something that you should be working on, because you'll end up buying likes and and even engagement. Actually, you can even buy engagement now. So it's very iffy on all these KPIs. But you can't lie when it comes to real engagement. When it comes to real fans engaging on your page, on your Twitter platform, these are things that you can't lie. You will know because you are smarter than the robots, right? So we want to focus on engagement with fans through comments, shares, opinions, etc. And if your KPI does not support business goal, then spending money on not those things does not really make sense. Basically, with digital media and the KPIs that comes along with it, you can measure things, and then you can improve them as well. This is unlike the previous form of KPIs. All right. So what are KPIs? For me, in our firm, we use cost per engagement, which is a very fair estimation of comparing what works and what didn't work for your social media strategy. Yeah. Imagine you spend this much money, you know what you're going to get out of it. And then you have an idea of how much you spend per engagement. The next thing you do is to go to the next campaign. So the first one, you just got to believe in, like, this is the best that you can do. Then in the next campaign, you do something similar, you try something else, you change a bit of your validation, you change a bit of your medium from bloggers to YouTubers, and then you see whether that works for you, for the money that you pay. From there, you can then balance between the cost per engagement, and you see where your money is, worth throwing to. Even this works for influencers as well, right? Why put your money on a very, very high following influencer when the ones that has more engagement, less influencer, cost a lot more cheaper and give you a better cost per engagement? So that's the kind of theory that we're trying to educate our clients, because again, they're not used to the sort of KPIs that we use, right? Other KPIs to mention include brand mentions. So there's many tools out there that Zoe has mentioned, how you can track the number of mentions that your brand has gotten through on blogs, on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, not Snapchat yet, but maybe someday. And even average time spent per article. So how many of you have actually liaised with any sort of viral portals? And they tell you they have 2,000 shares, 3,000 shares. Sometimes I don't even know what to believe anymore, all right? You don't know if the numbers is fake. But what they can't lie is that when you send Google Analytics off the page result, and the average time spent, to me, it means so much more than shares. Because this tells me that one person took about 5 minutes to read an article as compared to a listicle site, which means like, 10 ways to make a bomb. Okay, sorry, that's not a very appropriate example, but you know what I mean, right? The listicle types, yeah, number 1, number 2, number 3, and you get about 30 seconds, and that's it, tops. And then you move on because you like the headlines, but you don't really want to read the article, right? But just this is not a shout out or anything, but I've worked with a platform like Chili Sauce, and Chili Sauce gave us a really good a report on our work, and they can tell us that they didn't tell us. They shared us a Google Analytics that showed that one of the articles that we worked with them for got 7 minutes engagement. 7 minutes. That's how much a person spends on that article, reading the article, making sure the content is within their bodies, and whatever actions they want to do after that, I don't care. But they read it for 7 minutes. That's the kind of engagement and KPI that I want to tell my clients, because that is so much more worth it compared to the number of shares if they're just reading it for, say, 5 seconds, right? So A/B testing, just going through it. Basically, with all these things that you can have, with the cost per engagement being your bottom line that you can use for digital campaigns, try different things. Try using bloggers, try using YouTubers, try using Instagrammers or Facebookers, or try using a website versus a Facebook application platform, or try using a viral portal on video versus a Facebook video that you boost using ads. There's just so many things you can do with digital advertising and marketing and advertising that the world is really your oyster. Of course, if you work with innovative and creative digital agencies, you can probably do more. All right? So a summary of what I shared is basically you should be realizing that the normal average KPIs that you have done or used before may make no sense anymore. Right, you got to move forward in times. We use digital tools. It may be scary because what you thought as 1 million people using that used to look at your campaign, now in reality you're only seeing about 2,000 people looking at it. This is something that you have to accept, and you have to explain to the board, this is the truth, and now we have to do more to make sure that we don't waste our money in unnecessary areas. So this will help you then achieve your business goals and not overly focus on things that does not matter. You can monitor the data closely using social analytical and listening tools, and that's not enough. You have to humanize the element. So, you either hire a team to do analytics, or you can get other people to study the analytics so that it means something to you. Otherwise, data is meaningless for you. And of course, you got to test various strategies through various campaigns, various timelines, and you will get the best results at some point, and that's the benchmark. So once you get that benchmark, you can do many other things because you know that you're not wasting your money. Well, I think that's a better solution than spending a few $1,000 on a print that may not even give you an engagement or not. And with that, just a sample of engaging content. As you can, just like what Shane was sharing, this kind of content gets you kind of engagement that you want to see, and then you can test it with another photo, and then you can do the engagement comparison. So A/B testing. If you have a product that is not basically it's a beauty product, but it's not the normal way of doing things, then you can take that as engagement content as well for targeted consumers. Yeah. And collaboration and co-branding can also help you to increase your engagement KPIs. So this is one example of my Burger Lab working with the Big Group. Of course, this Big Mac thing got a lawsuit from a very famous brand. I know I don't have to tell you who, but nevertheless, this content went viral. So again, working with influencers, BuzzFeed content. Yeah, actually, I'm just trying to go to the end so that I don't waste much time. But hopefully you guys get what I mean. Bottom line is test, get your KPIs right, and do whatever you can. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Come on, everyone, stand up. Everyone is yawning. Everyone is just slouching on. Come on, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. Let's do some stretching. All right, come on, let's stretch. Sorry, I'm not like a fitness instructor, but let's stretch a bit. Everyone's just yawning away from the stage. I'm yawning too, so I'm going to stretch. Yeah, and it's really cold on stage. Can someone fix the air conditioning? I've been getting this icy blast. I think all of us have been getting that. So if someone could just, turn down the air conditioning, especially around here, it would be fantastic. Okay, cool. All right, sit down, sit down, sit down. Okay, so I think that was a really, really good session and summary from all of our speakers here today. Basically, on some metrics that you can look out for, I think some strategy and some different tools that you can do. So just as a caveat, I am working at a social intelligence company, a software company, and we do our own proprietary software that measures social intelligence. So before that, I was at Twitter. And I used to look after content for Twitter across the region. And one thing that I love to tell all my clients is, if you don't want something to appear in a newspaper, don't ever post it on social media. Don't ever do that, right? Because anything can be misconstrued, and if that happens, well, good luck to you. So be careful of that whenever you think about social media and stuff. But all stories aside, I'm going to share a couple of stories today about social intelligence and about software and everything else, so I hope this will be interesting for some of you. Let's see. Is this working? There you go. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story today about Drew. So this is a very interesting man because he does everything that defies convention. Now imagine looking like that, top left, and gaining 35 kilograms so that you can lose it all and go back to that in 1 year. Now I think it's crazy because if I were a guy and I look like the top left, I wouldn't want to look all the way down to the top right and go back there, right? But he's a fitness instructor, and he basically set up a website called fit2fat2fit.com. They basically chart how he actually was a really fit person. He gained 35 kilograms and he lost it all so that he could prove to his clients that, hey, I wasn't as fit as before, but I could do it through proper nutrition, through proper dieting, through proper exercise. So what is the point of this whole story? By the way, read about his story, it's quite interesting. My whole point is, you can't measure what you don't track, and that's with social media, right? I think, both Zoe and Essa and, Chris, right, they all talked about different strategies and metrics that you can measure, with your social media campaigns. If you're just staring at Facebook and Twitter all day and you're not actually tracking and measuring different metrics, then, there's no point actually having any content push or messaging pushes on social media, right? So this is the story of Fit to Fat to Fit. Of course, he took a picture, I think almost every other week, just to chart his progress. So, I think, how many of you here are familiar with social listening? Anyone? Good, all right. So how many of you have been using Twitter analytics, Facebook analytics, like what our speakers have talked about before? Some of you? Okay, brilliant. All right, excellent. So I'm going to share with you today as well another view on how you can do social listening. So with, different tools or whatsoever. So I like to compare share of voice online to steady energy. Because you can do campaigns, but campaigns are bursts of energy that happen suddenly. So imagine if you have a low volume, but steady volume of brand conversation over time. It's steady energy, like the sun. Whereas, if you have your campaigns, it's like a burst of activity, like lightning, literally, right? It suddenly happens, there's no conversation, and suddenly, boom, you have a huge product launch, whatever it is. You pump in advertising money for your campaign. And there's suddenly a lot of energy that comes up, right? Like lightning. But what happens if you actually measure steady brand conversation over time versus just doing a periodic campaign? What happens is that you actually get sustained share of voice over time about your brand versus doing a campaign, 2 or 3 times a year. So your brand would always get that top of mind awareness. So think like the sun. Don't think like lightning. That's really important about brand conversations and social listening. So when do we use social listening? I'm going to tell you when do you use it and when do you not use it, because you hear plenty of conversations, right? How do I use social listening? How do I use different tools? But when do you not use it as well? Something I'm going to cover later. So 5 key things that you need to know about when to use social listening. Number 1, it's a really good way to understand what consumers are talking about you unsolicited you don't need any prompt. It's like being a stalker in a room, but you can stalk everyone online. That's why I told you guys, right? Don't post anything that you don't want people to know on social. Stop posting all your baby's photos, right? From 0 all the way to 5 years old. Oh my goodness. Every time I open up my Facebook newsfeed or Twitter page, I see babies crying, pooping, eating, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, I love babies, but seeing your baby 7 times a week is more than enough for me. So parents, love your kids, but don't keep posting your children's pictures online because they will hate you when they grow up. That's number 1. Number 2 is, it's a very good way to discover new, interesting areas that your consumers might be interested in. So 95% of the time, I think 90 to 95% of the time, people are talking about other things, not your brand. Let's just be honest. Let's think about us as consumers, right? We might love Coca-Cola or Nike or Adidas, right? But how many times are we actually talking about Adidas online? We are talking about sports, we're talking about yoga and tennis and all these kind of different conversation topics, right? I mean, why would you talk about Adidas like 365 days a year? Even if you love Adidas and you paint 3 stripes on your bedroom and everything else, you won't do that, right? So my point is, if you know who your brand advocates are, you need to see what kind of content you're talking about. That's really important. I mean, no one is so interested in your brand other than you yourself as a brand or marketing manager. Now, the third thing is, you can use this to conduct as a supplement to other research that you're already conducting. Things like traditional research and focus groups. Use the social listening part as a supplement. A lot of people say, oh, there's no ROI in social media, there's no this, there's no that. You know, I call bullshit on this because seriously, it's one data source. Like how, focus groups are one data source, traditional advertising is one data source whatsoever. It's one channel. You need to use everything as a holistic view. You can't just depend on social for everything, and neither can you just depend on traditional offline stuff for everything. That's really crucial. And the fourth thing is, if you're in a marketing role, a digital role, it's really good to compare countries, compare local insights, global insights, and of course, it's a real-time pulse of what people are talking about you online, just to see what's happening in the moment, volume and velocity of content and conversations and topics. Now, when do we not use social listening, right? This is very important. Number 1 is, if you have a very distinct representative sample of audience that you want to look at. Let's just say you want to specifically monitor new moms who just had 1 baby and are earning $3,000 to $5,000 a month. Now, obviously, you can't do that through social listening, right? Let's just be honest here. I mean, I sell software, but if a client asks me if I can do that, I'm like, no, I can't. I mean, I can give you some insights about moms in general, but I can't give you a very specific target criteria because this social listening component is a supplement to whatever you're already doing for brand equity studies or whatsoever. So I can't give you highly quantitative data or do brand modeling or kind of stuff. That's a no-no as well for social listening. I can't target specific zip codes or postal codes in Malaysia or Singapore or Indonesia. I mean, a lot of people ask, so can you target down by the country to the city to the county to the village? And I'm like, hey, wait, hold on. I can't go down to the warung in Indonesia. Okay, relax a bit, chill. I can't do that. So, relax a bit. And of course, the last part is, if you want to do research in general about what your consumers are talking about, you got to do both traditional and online. It's a whole supplement thing. Okay, 5 things to think about when you want to design a really strong social listening study. So 5 different key points. The first thing, I think this was supplemented by what my lovely panelists have talked about just now. You need to align it to key business questions. That's really important. You can't just get a few tools, play around with all of them, whether it's Twiroid, whether it's BuzzSumo, whether it's anything on the planet, cloud and everything else, but you don't know what you're actually thinking about for the business, right? Because when you go and pitch to a client, when you're a business themselves, they're going to say, okay, I want to basically drive product awareness of my latest product. How are you going to help me do that? So you got to think about the business question and work backwards. That's really important. So thinking about consumer opinions is really important. For example, how do consumers describe my brand is more important than trying to track a vanity metric like how many mentions does my brand get. So remember what I talked about Adidas just now. Asking very qualitative questions is more important than just tracking volume and vanity metrics. Second thing, as I've said a few times just now, is to combine social with other types of research to give you a more holistic picture of the customer. The third part is think broadly to get the best insights. So category and need level analysis is actually more important than campaign level analysis. Remember what I talked about always on listening versus just a peak in activity that you measure. Because monitoring what your consumers are talking about all the time is more important than just measuring it during one period and then after that you lose them. And then you have to re-engage them and spend a lot more money during a campaign period to engage them again. The last part is, fourth part, sorry, not the last part. Use tool-driven metrics directionally. So for example, I think Christopher said this really well. There are some metrics you have to present to the boardroom, but it's really important that you don't actually live by the number of impressions that you get for your brand, for example. Because it's useful as a gauge, but I think things like understanding cost per engagement, understanding engagement metrics, time spent on site, people that actually take a little bit more action than just viewing something is more important. And of course, not every negative mention is a crisis, okay? So there are people who will love you, hate you, dislike you, troll you, I like to say this, a lot of people act like tigers, behind the keyboard, but when you meet them in real life, they're like little cats. So don't worry about, when you see this person flaming you online, ask them to come out and see you and see whether they'll do that to you in real life. Honestly, right? So you have to manage negative mentions and don't, how do I put it, glorify them by just really trying to address it all the time. I would put it that way, because the more you glorify them and the more you address it and the more you address really bullshitty stuff that is attacking your brand all the time, you're just going to, how do I put it, extend the situation. So I think it's good to, when there are things that happen to your brand online, for example, that could not be as positive as you might want it to be, address it very constructively. Don't take it at face value and don't let it affect your brand or yourself too much. I think that's really crucial. And of course, if people are being, spammy online and they're not being very nice, and after repeated measures, they're not being good about it, just block them or delete them. Yes, I said that. And I actually advise some of my clients to do that, especially like financial clients or whatsoever, because if people actually don't respect the community forum or the forum rules, you have every right to delete them, especially if you have the rules on the page. So that's one thing. I'm just going to go very quickly on what BrandWatch does, because basically BrandWatch is able to aggregate all these different websites and sources and different data sources across the board into one platform for you to track your brand mentions on social media. So briefly mentioning, the good news is that Forrester actually just ranked us as a leader in Asia Pacific specifically after about 9 months of operations in Singapore. So I was quite delighted by that. We help a lot of different brands use social intelligence to affect different use cases throughout the entire organization. Things like campaign tracking, things like influencer tracking, things like always on listening. These are some things that we help businesses become social businesses using social intelligence. We cover we cover about 85 million data sources. So Facebook is one data source, Twitter is one data source, Tumblr, Flickr, they are all different data sources. But we also cover local forums, websites, news sites, and blog sites because we own our own crawling technology. So think of it like Google, but we focus a lot more on social media sites and consumer opinions. That's how BrandWatch essentially works. So we cover a lot of local sites around the region, so we're able to pick up different mentions of your brand across, Hardware Zone, The Star, TripAdvisor, so on and so forth. We also do command center solutions where we can visualize your data to your boardroom, to your executives. So I'm going to end off my little summary on social listening with this thought in mind. So when you look at a picture of this, right, you can't really tell it's a sunrise or a sunset, right? So a picture can paint 1,000 words, but if you don't know the context behind it, you will never know what actually is the true perspective of it. And I think social listening and social data is around the same vein. So my whole point is music can set the tone of a good movie, but data sets the tone of your brand story. Think about the movie Jaws. Without the soundtrack, it's going to be some silly movie about a shark just swimming around and biting everyone, right? If you have a happy tune to it, right, it's not going to be as scary as it seems, right? So social data is in the same vein. Sometimes you just need a bit of intelligence to help your brand do better on social media. So with that, I'm done, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, but if anyone has any, get those prepared because I'll come to the audience in a moment. So a question for everyone. You know, we've all sort of touched on the different metrics or KPIs that we as brands or brands as our clients need to look at. But the KPIs are changing so quickly as social media evolves, and even if we look at Facebook, they've now introduced reactions. You can love something, you can cry, you can ha-ha over something. So how do brands keep on top of what they should be measuring? Because it changes so quickly. Like where can they actually kind of look to find the right KPIs?
I guess I could start with that. So, as you know, you're right, the KPIs are always evolving, and every social media analytical tool seems to have their own version of what counts. We use a number of tools, Social Bakers, and some of the tools that Zoe has mentioned, and they come up with very funny, well, not funny, but I would call innovative KPIs, such as the number of engagements per 1,000 posts. And they look at that as a better measurement of what's current instead of evaluating based on spikes versus the average brand mentions. So this also tells us that we are it can be very flexible. We can customize solutions for the businesses and see, the things which is important for them. For example, something that's important for brand A may not be important for brand B, or for many brands compared to the governments, as we've talked about last night. So I think the beauty of it is that there's no real one KPI that captures everything, just like what the PR industry is trying to do. We could make our own that fits the client, or rather the brand. And at the end of the day, it's about comparing within yourself and as well as your rivals within the same industry. Yeah. So maybe a little example is we know one of our clients are the F&B industry, and we know that for them, brand mentions must go hand in hand with promotional codes, the usage of promotional codes. So we devised a theory of a number of mentions versus cost per engagement, and the usage of promotional codes to come up with, we call it cost per engagement, but there's some kind of unique formula to it. And we compare one campaign to another campaign to a different season, and then we can see and evaluate what works, what doesn't work, and that's where we push from there.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. Definitely down to each individual organisation or government. It depends on what their strategy is and what their outcome is, their goals. And keeping up to date with what the new thing out is it's important. I was talking yesterday about social media champions within an organisation, allocating a team or a person that's the person that keeps up to date with the latest trends and the things coming out. And then them researching, reputable sources that they can find out, well, this is the latest feature come out on Facebook, following that journey of that new feature. What does that new feature mean for us as a company, and how can that fit into our strategy? Does it fit into our strategy, and how would we measure that? So that's where I would go from that point of view.
I think just adding on to, what both lovely panelists have talked about, there are a lot of metrics, right, in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatsoever. I think at the end of the day, what does the business want to measure? And what do they want to know? What is the top of mind questions that they want to answer? And plug it in from there. Because Facebook is introducing new features. Just the reactions part, or the sad, happy, angry kind of postings, right? I mean, the reactions to different postings. We can obsess about how many people have posted angry on one post, or think about collectively, of all the different posts that have happened, how has that impacted people's perception of my brand over time? I think that's a bit more interesting. Yeah.
Just to add one final point, I think it would be interesting if brands could actually put some kind of point system on these different engagements. So, for example, the complex reactions to Facebook now, you have the sad, you have the angry. So if you put like a -1, -2, and +5 kind of concept, then you could get sort of like your own version of brand sentiments, analysis.
Yeah.
So I think, you can play along with
I think so. Some tools do that actually. We actually do that at CrowdTangle. So if you use the tool, you can decide how important is a share, a comment, or a like to you. So maybe a share is like 10 out of 10, a like is 0 because you're not caring about that. So you can actually decide that. So there are ways that you can do that. Even if you're not using a tool, you can do that yourself internally and then, kind of do the math on it to help you. But I think another question I have that sort of follows on from this is that often in businesses, even in government organisations, we see that the social media teams sometimes are not fully plugged into the management team or are not actually director level, and they're not a part of the business decisions in some cases. And I think that was definitely the case, say, 5 years ago. Now it's slightly changing, which is great to see. So is there any advice you have from your own experiences or people that you're working with who've had that challenge where they don't actually know exactly what the business is trying to do, so it's hard for them to do their own jobs on social?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm working with an international company at the moment, and they have 6 offices in Europe. They were struggling with content because each of the offices had different activities. They wanted to collate all the information together to one portal to be able to then push out the social media posts. And they said, how can we do that? It was a challenge for them to be able to bring it through from management, marketing, advertising, all the different areas. So what we ended up doing was writing a manual of how exactly the process was, of what they had to go through, what their responsibilities would be, and they would then have an agenda of what would each be accomplished. So what ended up happening is that they'd done internal training of how that agenda would be, and then they had a set deadline each month of when content had to go to the social media champion. The champion would then convert that content and push it out. So integrating social internally with those 6 offices over Europe was actually doing training to be able to train the company to be more social. So that was an example. I don't know if that
Do they use, or do any of your other clients use a tool to help them? So for example, I've used Sprinkler in the past, and that allows you, so if I'm a social media editor or whatever, I'll post something in Sprinkler, schedule the time, and then I'll assign it to my boss to approve it or not. So do you use tools like that? And
Sendable does that. So you can put the whole team in, they can then delegate, they can say, what does it say, moderate the posts first, and then someone then signs it off.
So there are tools to help in that way as well. That's great.
I think the other one's called Yammer, which is an internal social profile as well.
For us, we don't really use like tools. We've sort of worked with many clients, and we had this problem for many years. For example, even within the company, the company itself, there is obviously the distance between the social media marketing team, or rather the marketing team, versus the product side, and then the top management side. And if that exists, we can't even do our work. So we have that problem. So what we've done with them is to promise sort of like every month, you need to send us these things. So they're sort of forced to look at certain parts of business that they don't normally see, for example, on the marketing side, but they only focus on the digital branding side. Because I think that's what everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to feel that they are part of the campaign. And when people feel that, from every department in the organization, chances are they want to actually contribute. So an example would be one of those F&B companies that they're much more invested because they feel they're proud of being part of the organization. So when we do digital marketing town hall sessions, for example, we will invite the salespeople, we invite the finance people, we'll invite the operational side, and when we discuss something exciting and they start to see, oh, this is something cool, this is good for my brand, and then they contribute, even if it's ideas that doesn't make sense, but it's still some ideas. So when that happens, then you reduce the jurang. What's jurang? The gap, yes, between the different departments. Yeah, sorry. So that's like that.
Yeah. When I consult for different clients, I see it in 3 different buckets. So the problem as to why digital hasn't gotten, let's just say, maybe enough spend as it could have in the marketing funnel or the sales funnel is because a social media manager is concerned about likes, engagements, but the CEO is concerned about sales, right? About retail footfall. And it's very difficult on the surface to connect all of that. Until today, I don't think anyone has really perfected it. But it's important to know what different stakeholders are measured upon, right? So let's just say, for example, in one bucket, you see digitally led metrics, things like clicks to the website, likes, engagements, engagement rate. A marketing manager, then you go laterally, right? A marketing manager is measured on things like brand health, brand equity, whatsoever, share of voice, and then you go right in there, and then you can see how it all connects back to how it could ultimately drive sales, retail, and I think adding on to both of your points, right? It's holistic. Everyone needs to work together. Different functions need to work together. So social can't be a silo. It's throughout the entire organization. And that's how, if you have social at the core of the business, it plugs into everyone, and then people would invest more in it.
Companies like Google and all the Silicon Valley companies do very well at this, right?
Yep, exactly, yes.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions in the audience?
Oh my
Yep.
God.
So many
We've
questions.
got a couple down here.
Hi, Chuck from Chili Sauce. Christopher, thanks for the plug just now. Okay, so my question is, like, with all these analytics that you guys get, right? How often does the client actually react to it strategically, and how often do they just react to it emotionally and just ask you to do something else? And how do you change that mentality if it goes one way or the other? Thanks.
When we work with clients, we generate reports of the metrics that we've set for, like the KPIs when we first start working with them. So we meet with them on a monthly basis, sit down, have a look to see what we've actually achieved over that month. We analyse what the results were emotionally and the outcome on the return on investment as well. So like Christelle was just mentioning, we actually meet with the different departments that have that input as such, the marketing that like the metrics and the board that like the return on investment aspect of it. When we analyse it, then we then say, how do you feel about the outcome? So we turn it around on the client, and they say that they will then give us the reaction that we are looking for, whether it's good or bad. If it's like, well, I wasn't expecting that, we then say, well, what is it that you really would like to see in addition to what we originally set out on the KPIs? So we're constantly growing with the client to make sure that the metrics are what they would like to achieve, because when we originally sit with a client, they don't actually know what they want to achieve from it. They want to see the journey through. So that's how we start to really work with a client. We work with the client and say, right, let's see how it goes over the first 3 to 6 months, and finalize and really fine-tune your KPIs, working with the trends in the market as well, to eventually get to where they want to be. Hopefully that answers a little bit of your question.
I echo Zoe. I think you know, when you do consulting or you act as an agency to the brand, or even if you're working for that brand, it's all about partnership. You know, you can't just say that person has failed based on work done in, say, a week or 2 weeks or 1 month, even not even 3 weeks, not even 3 months sometimes. Especially for companies that are not immediately associated with you know, the customers. Sorry, B2B companies, for example. So these things takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of emotional as well as statistical, what do you call that, the discussions in order to get the client to understand where we're going from here and what we're going to try to achieve at the end point. So if the client is sold with what we want to achieve to the end point, by right, they should allow us to experiment until we get it right. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a setup to a true story, working with you guys at Chili Sauce. Our client previously works with other portals that are a lot more higher numbers in shares. But we also happen to know the read average time, you know. So we know that we're going to try to convince the client to go against something that they like or something they've told their bosses before, which is, wow, our article got 20,000 shares. right? So how do you convince them to say, we don't want 20,000 shares, we just want, we want you to understand that 5,000 shares is enough if it means that the people reading the content is going to read it for, say, 6 minutes average compared to, say, only a 30-second average. So that is the difficulty. But if they understand what we are trying to achieve, and of course, we have to guide them along the way, then yes, I think they will gladly accept the solution that we provided.
And for people that don't understand social media, sometimes to go into a company and the board might not understand they're at that level that they don't want to use social media, but they've got a younger team that really want to push digital. I use the story about relationships, personal relationships with your partner. The world is forever changing, but we need to tweak our relationships all the time to be able to go together on a journey, and that's exactly the same as a social media journey.
Do you want to add to that, or?
I think they pretty much summed up the whole conversation. I guess just to add on, I think different people look at different metrics, different people have different priorities. So I think on our end, when we work with different clients, we do a high-level category update per week. We do an insights report, every month, and then after we plug it all together. Yeah, pretty much.
Great. I have one question from Twitter from Khalid. I'm not sure if he's in the audience. So the question is, which is more important to address, sentiment or numbers of mentioned around certain keywords? So Crystal, you were talking about this, and I love this question because I get asked this all the time. And maybe you can just touch on that, but also how do brands then monitor those interests conversation. So if you are Adidas, you're not looking for people talking about hashtag Adidas. You're looking for people talking about sport in general. So how do brands do that?
Well, if I had $1 for every single time I've been asked about sentiment tracking, I don't have to work anymore. So I think sentiment tracking, a lot of brands look at it and they live by it. They think it's highly crucial as the pulse of what people are thinking about positively or negatively. I say it's just an indicator, because if, let's just say, it moves by just 1%, they panic and then they call us and they say, oh my goodness, it just increased by 1% negative mentions. I'm like, relax. It's like 98% positive and 3% negative. It's not that bad, right? I think, as you've mentioned, I think there's a lot of different metrics, the volume of mentions and sentiment. It's all about looking at what it addresses as a business, right? I mean, if your business KPI or question that you need to answer for this month or this quarter is how you can actually improve your messaging around the latest launch of the Samsung Galaxy S7, what you could potentially do is look at what people don't really like about, let's just say, the new S7, categorize those mentions by product features and look at it based off that. But you don't have to panic if one product feature suddenly has, 5 negative mentions overnight, right, and everything else. So I think be proactive, don't be reactive when it comes to sentiment tracking. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've run out of time. So if anyone else has any other questions, you can chat with us separately. Oh, sorry, there's one more. Okay, just a quick one. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Shamim from Lion. So I actually have a few questions, but I'll come to you personally. So the main question is, I was just wondering, with Instagram views recently introduced on Instagram, so I was just wondering, should we even be measuring views as part of our Instagram engagement, even though it's not unique?
I think, sorry, I'm just automatically taking the mic, sorry. I'm very passionate about this views and impressions topic because I think it's all vanity, right? I see the same video on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and all of them at different numbers. Isn't it a bit strange, right? Because how a platform constitutes as a view is very different. On Facebook, once it just scrolls through the newsfeed, it's one view. Yeah, that's one view, right? But for YouTube, it's kind of like you got to click play and watch it to a certain point, and then that's one view. So, yeah, don't get too obsessed about it, I guess, again.
I think at this stage with Facebook and Instagram, there's not a lot of data that they're giving out yet about video views or watches. They've sort of promised it half-heartedly, I think. So we're kind of waiting for that. So I think, as Crystal said, it is still a little bit of a vanity number. I don't think it matters too much. It's fine to kind of track it, but don't take that as your most important metric.
We follow this conversation a lot on a few platforms like Quora, on LinkedIn, and I guess there's a lot of people actually talking about these things, and we are also following what the official platform will say about these things. So it's a continuing problem for all of us. So it's something that we have to just talk about, agree on, and then we move on with what we think is the best way.
Exactly. Okay, again, sorry we've gone over time, but I think it was a really interesting discussion, and I want to thank all of the panelists for their input and everyone out there for questions. And as I said, if anyone does have other questions, just approach us individually as the day goes on. Thank you.